Hello, I'm Dr. Rostenberg, and I want to personally thank you for checking out my YouTube channel. Stay tuned at the end of the video, and I will give my recipe for your healing process. Now, I wish we could achieve our results with just diet and lifestyle alone, but supplements really do make the difference. And to help you with that, you'll have an opportunity to order supplements at a discounted rate. We'll see you then.
Tonight's video is an exciting piece of information that's going to look at how our brain processes stress. And when we think about disease and we think about health, the argument could be made that stress is the ultimate cause of all illness. And when we look at the methylation cycle and we start to understand how that cycle is involved in the production and the breakdown of neurotransmitters, it really needs to get our attention that we need to look more at this pathway to gain some more understanding. So that's my goal with you tonight. I just want to also thank all my viewers out there for all your positive feedback, and certainly say thank you to Sterling Hill and her MTHFR support organization. If you haven't already, checked out their Facebook page and check in with her organization, that's also a great resource. But tonight we're going to jump in and really kind of introduce some ideas behind COMT. And COMT and MAO are very important pathways that break down stress neurotransmitters in our brain. When you get your 23andMe report, you need to run it through an additional report to make sense of the data, make it easy, make it tangible. This is our favorite report we use in our clinic on a daily basis, and this is Sterling's MTHFR support report. And I've kind of cut and paste things just for my purpose tonight, but you can see that this report is showing that this individual has inherited polymorphisms in their MAOA pathway and as well several important COMT systems. So why would COMT be important? And again, this video is really focusing on that. We're going to get into MAOA, MAO pathways in other videos, but this video is really looking at COMT, and this is a kind of simplified version of how stress hormones like epinephrine, also dopamine, also norepinephrine get from your brain and body into your urine. And you can see there's multiple steps. You'll see the same different enzymes repeated over and over again, because one way or the other it's got to go through these chemical reactions in order to become the waste product that we get rid of. What I will show you in later videos is how yeast and fungal byproducts, bacterial byproducts, I've shown that in some other videos already, but other byproducts of microorganisms can slow down this pathway. But really our main focus here is on the COMT system and how polymorphisms, how things that we're born with that alter the speed of our genes are going to make us more sensitive to stress. That's the big idea. The reason why stress becomes more toxic for one person versus another, the reason why in the same situation one person has a very mild reaction to stress, they rally, they get, they kind of rise to the occasion, whereas the other person standing next to them, same situation, has a palpitating heart, they get tachycardia, they can't breathe, they have what would be described as a panic attack, their blood pressure goes through the roof, they get a ton of anxiety and worry. Those are situations that happen to people. They're things we deal with in our practice every day. But what we're really looking at in those two situations, between person A, who's very calm, and person B, who has an overreaction, what we're looking at are two different levels of catecholamines, of stress hormones in the brain. If you don't have a lot of stress hormones in your body, guess what? You won't be very stressed out. The converse is also true. If you have a lot of stress hormones in your body, you're going to be stressed out for no reason. Now, the methylation cycle gives us insight into this pathway. It shows us here in this picture, this is a presynaptic and postsynaptic neuron. Well, dopamine is broken down, and the same is true of norepinephrine and epinephrine. Dopamine is broken down on the postsynaptic side, and really what the takeaway from this is that if you have a slow COMT system, man, you're going to have a lot more dopamine in your frontal lobe, in your brain, and we're going to show this over and over again tonight. So slow COMT means higher dopamine slash catecholamines in your brain equals more sensitive to stress. And that is really key to understand. Now, I don't want those of you who've just gotten your report back to think that you get this horrible report with all this red and yellow on it. You've got to understand that these genes are extremely common. We've never, in fact, worked with a patient who didn't have, one either MTHFR, COMT, or MAOA. I mean, that's practically 100% of people. So we now know this new study that came out earlier this year. Actually, it was published right early. It's actually slated to publish in August. This is brand new information, but 80% of the population has a COMT gene polymorphism. That's 80%. So that means that 20% of you out there have red in that category for the gene, the V158M, which is the most well-known and most studied. There's about a dozen or so COMT genes on Sterling's report. They're all important, but I would say this one is more important because we have more science behind it. But you can see that 20% of everyone is red, 50% is yellow, and only 30% are green. So in fact, not having a polymorphism puts you into the minority. So most of us are dealing with these types of issues. Now, it is interesting to note, we talk about MTHFR, how slow is it going? The C677++ MTHFR is slowed down somewhere between 60 to 70%, depending on your reference. But look at this reference, same study, giving us some brand new data showing that the the homozygous COMT gene is slowed down 300%. Now, I don't want this to keep you up, give you nightmares at night, but it just means that your genes are definitely slowed down if this is your genetic report, if this is your profile. Individuals who are homozygous COMT are just going to be less tolerant of stress. Now, they're also going to be more intelligent in certain situations. And the reason why is that, and I'll show this in the video here in a second, but having more dopamine in your brain isn't always a bad thing. It actually wakes your brain up. You're kind of born caffeinated. You're good at focusing. You're good at, you want to make sure your world is really ordered. You don't want to have a lot of chaos. Typically people do well with having discipline, keeping their house clean, keeping their life orderly. It's just that's the way they work best because they don't have a lot of room for extra stress. It's kind of cool how our genes influence our personality. I think it's absolutely fascinating. But 300% reduction in enzyme speed if you're V158M++, and you'll see that on your genetic report. Now, the reason dopamine needs our attention because what it does is it activates the neocortex. Okay, this is the human brain. If you've ever heard the relationship between the human brain, the mammalian brain, and the reptilian brain. Well, our human brain is where our personality is. It's our CEO. It's our planning. It's our high-functioning part of ourself. It's where Michelangelo paints the Sistine Chapel. It's where great inventions come from, great awareness, and it's important that this part of our brain is nourished. Now, dopamine is needed in the right amount. If it's too low, you get depression. If it's too high, you get overstimulation. With depression and overstimulation, you get a loss of brain function. And so really what the research is saying, it's not exactly clear 100% of dopamine is anti-anxiety or pro-anxiety. What I can tell you is it's both, depending on the level of dopamine in your brain. That's what you need to take away. But dopamine, when it's helping your brain work well, it helps the human brain babysit the more deeper, ancient brain of ours that's full of fears and phobias and impulses and outbursts and OCD behavior and panic and anxiety and worry. Those feelings are always going on inside of our brain because if the brain doesn't fire, the brain will die. So the brain fires those circuits, but it has a babysitter that ignores them so we don't just melt down when we're giving a speech or have a behavioral problem when we're driving around in the car with our family. And that's what the neocortex does. So dopamine it plays a key role in helping us balance our stress response by inhibiting these deeper brain areas that are sort of primitive and primordial, and that's called the limbic system. There's a lot of research on that. We're not going to get too into that into this video, but basically a healthy dopamine level allows your brain to function in a healthy way, and that suppresses and controls your deeper, more ancient emotions that will bubble up to the surface if you don't control them. Dopamine, again, more research just pointing to the fact that dopamine is related to fear and anxiety, and as I said, if you don't have enough dopamine, you kind of get into an angry, depressed state, and you have cravings. And if you have too much dopamine, then you burn out your frontal lobe, and you start to get more panic, more fear, more of those negative, what I would say are more negative emotions. And so the research is kind of coming into focus here as we go. This is an important chart because what it does is it's showing us the bell curve of dopamine and catecholamine function. I really think this is a great learning tool. It's a good example of what's really going on in our brain when we're feeling stressed out. It's how the methylation cycle is affecting our brain. So what I want to draw your attention to here is see these pictures you kind of have here, small disorganized crystals poking out of the surface, and then you have this nice big crystal here, and you have these other crystals kind of disorganized. What I'm going to suggest, this is an artist version of a dysfunctional brain, a brain that's really tuned in and working well, and then a dysfunctional brain. And when I say brain, I don't mean the whole thing. I mean the neocortex. I mean the top part of your frontal lobe, the Ferrari part of your brain, the CEO, the part of your brain that's your personality, your self-awareness, the higher functioning parts of your brain. That's what we're talking about. And what the research has shown is people who are born with a green in their COMT gene for V158M. Again, all the research is like V158M based. We extrapolate that in practice and basically apply it to all the COMT genes, just to give us, kind of the same model we work with. But COMT negative, you're starting at a lower level of dopamine. So this curve represents the level of dopamine inside the frontal lobe. Not enough, just right, too much, just like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Too hot, too cold, just right. Your brain wants it just right, okay? So when this person who's COMT negative gets stressed out, they get pushed, they get more dopamine, and so they start to bump along the line and get up here towards optimum. These are people who really thrive under stress. They actually make their life more stressed out because it bumps their dopamine level up right into the optimum range. And that's a good strategy for them, but that won't always work for everyone. Now you're looking at somebody who's COMT plus minus. This is the yellow category in the report. They're born with a little more dopamine at a resting level, getting out of bed in the morning, all things being equal. They have a little more dopamine in their brain. So they don't need quite as much stress to get into the optimum range. And in fact, if they get too much stress, they start to get knocked off the right side of the curve, and they start to bounce towards burning out and getting too much stress. See, decrease in brain output. Look at that picture. Optimum brain output, decreased brain output, decreased brain output. So now this brings us to the most important SNP that we're talking about tonight, the homozygous COMT individual. I've got them in my family. We all know them. I may be talking to one right now. You may be listening to this video. What this individual has is a lot of dopamine in their brain all the time. And the reason why is that their COMT, as I've just shown you, is slowed down, in their in vitro studies looking in, petri dishes, it's slowed down about 300%. We don't know exactly how slow it is in the brain, but we know that it's slower. There's no doubt about that. So the COMT++ individual starts their day in the optimum range. When they start to add stress, they start to get knocked way over to the right. And if the stress is too much, if there's too much inflammation in the body or a chronic infection or heavy metal toxicity combined with bad digestion and not a healthy home environment or stressful work environment, these are common scenarios. We see them in practice every day. If you combine all that in an individual's life who has COMT++, they're going to get burnt out. They're going to have panic, worry, anxiety, insomnia. They may have cardiovascular issues from all the excess catecholamines, which are very inflammatory. One of the one of the reasons that stress makes us so sick is that epinephrine, a catecholamine that's broken down by this pathway, turns into formaldehyde and creates a lot of inflammation in our body. So we want to make sure that we don't have too much of these powerful hormones. I mean, we're glad we have them, but we don't need too much. So this just illustrates where the different SNPs start. And you can see that the negative has more stress that they can tolerate before their optimum, whereas the plus really has to manage their stress carefully because they could get knocked off this right side and get way too much dopamine activity, and it's not fun. Here's another study basically saying the same thing. It's all about this U-shaped curve, okay? So when you have the val, the green, you start here, you get a little stressed out, boom, you end up in the optimum range. Well, if you're homozygous plus, you start in the optimum range, you get stressed out, you start getting knocked down the right side of the curve. That's the takeaway from today's video. If you get one thing from this video, understand that people with COMT++ are going to get knocked on the far side of the dopamine curve, and then they become dysfunctional. They get a lot of symptoms. It can show up cardiovascular symptoms, personality, behavior, stress. I mean, it can even cause infertility, you know. I mean, women who are overly stressed out start to get adrenal fatigue. It starts to change hormonal balance. Lots of things can impact our life just due to stress. So this study is showing you with 2 stressors simultaneously. This is showing you with 3. So look how optimum the person who's negative on their COMT, they thrive with 3 stressors simultaneously. But the person who's homozygous for COMT, man, they're getting, the more stressors you add, the further down the side they go. All right, so this is really just great science. It's the key takeaway from today's video. I really want to communicate that. So more data showing you the same thing, and I'm just repeating this over and over again because I want this to be the takeaway, is that dopamine is necessary for brain function, but just like anything, too much is as bad as too little. You can die of dehydration. You can actually die from drinking too much water. It's true. You can dilute your fluid inside of your body, dilute your electrolytes, and cause cardiac, cause a heat stroke and cause cardiac arrest. So what I want to share with you is that COMT++ excess stress causes too much dopamine to build in the frontal lobe. And so as you basically burn out or overstimulate the brain. And when we meet patients who have tried B vitamins and methyl groups, and they've kind of self-diagnosed, or they've maybe worked with another practitioner who wasn't as aware of these other pathways, they get their genetic report back. It says, oh my gosh, you're MTHFR, you're compound heterozygous for 1298, C677. You need 5 milligrams of methylfolate. You need 5 milligrams of methyl B12. You'll feel like $1 million. And this person, maybe, almost feels like they have to admit themselves to a psychiatric ward because they're so over methylated with those kind of dosages. And what you're seeing when people get over methylated, what you're seeing is that the brain is getting way too much dopamine produced, because remember, methyl groups are they add fuel to the cycle that creates your neurotransmitters. So the more methyl groups you take, you provide the biochemistry for the neurotransmitter production to commence, to keep going forward. So you can actually speed up neurotransmission, make way too many neurotransmitters when you over-methylate. And I believe it's the people who are COMT++ who are just, they're the ones who are over-methylating like crazy. So we have a different strategy for working with patients like this. It's really more around working on inflammation, healing the gut, removing chronic infections, removing anything that stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. That's what chiropractic's all about. Acupuncture is great for that, body work in general, lots of different things. That's outside this conversation tonight. But this study says the same thing, that when at a high load in the brain, at a high load of memory and working load, having COMT++, it pushes you into the suboptimal high range of dopamine stimulation, leading to reduced prefrontal efficiency. So that's scientific mumbo jumbo for saying when you have too much dopamine, your brain will not be functioning well and you won't feel good. We have another study that I like to show because it just kind of highlights the U curve. This was a study done, I believe it was done on rats. But it does show how our brains are, we have a lot in common with other animals. So you can see that the rat, when it was basically they did a memory test with these animals, and they showed that a little bit of epinephrine and a little more and a little more produced this optimum learning curve in the animal. But as they increased the epinephrine, this is 1 order of magnitude, this is going to be 2 orders of magnitude, this is getting up to 2.5 orders of magnitude, a lot more epinephrine, the brain just stops working well. And what happens is some of us are born here and we're falling off this way with too much stress. This is why natural medicine and taking care of yourself is just critical for moving forward in life. Now, the same thing's true of glucose, and I just had an experience with my toddler who we rarely ever give him sugar, but we went camping and marshmallows were the treat. And you watch children get a little glucose in their brain, in their body, and it really does activate their brain. And then you can see if you give them too much glucose, again, as you increase from 1 milligram per kilogram to 10 to 100 to 500, you're going to have behavioral problems, OCD, all kinds of issues with these children, because what's happening is you're giving the brain so much glucose that it's burning it out in the same type of U curve as we've talked about with the COMT. So I just want to point out that epinephrine, dopamine, norepinephrine are all catecholamines, and they're on a curve, and then so is glucose. So that's why high glucose food, kids are drinking soda at school. It's terrible. How they're going to learn anything? Their brain is totally blown out. They're not going to retain information well. So I want to just end on the idea that you work on the gut, and what you do with healing these COMT problems and helping people with overmethylation issues is you have to get to the root of where inflammation is coming from. And inflammation comes from your gut. So, if the immune system is responsible for creating chemical messages that stimulate the brain to react to stress, then we have to go back to the immune system and calm it down. And that is the root theory and the root fundamental science behind treating the gut. And I'm not pretending that doctors are, this isn't new. Just because methylation science is new, doctors have always been treating this. Functional medicine doctors, these wise healers who've been out there helping people, they've always been working on the gut. Now we know a little more about why it's changing people's brain. And so I just want to end with that. I want to just thank you again for your time and attention, and encourage you to check out my website, beyondmthfr.com. I'll have a blog post associated with this. Sometimes it's better to read something as well as you hear it. And there'll also be a link in there to some protocols that give you some ideas of the type of nutraceuticals and supplements that we use in our office to help deal with these types of issues. So I hope you find this information valuable, and if you have any questions or comments, please reach out.
Thank you so much for watching this video and sharing it with your friends and family. I personally believe, as I'm sure you do as well, that educating ourselves about what it truly means to be healthy is the only way we're going to change healthcare. I have created a website as a resource for you. To take advantage of this information, navigate to www.beyondmthfr.com and take a look around. In addition to blogs and articles I have written, you will find a tab on the menu labeled Protocols. It is a growing list of tools that I use in my office to help support my patients. You will find background information on common health conditions, you will find a detailed supplement protocol, and you will find dietary advice to support the body's natural healing process. You will also have access to order recommended supplements at a discounted rate and have them shipped to your front door. I'm giving you the tools that I use in practice every day to help you overcome health challenges and live a happier, healthier life. I have done my best to give you that information, and you will find it on these protocol pages. If you are looking for more help than simply what supplements should you take or what diet should you follow, I'm inviting you to come to Boise and see me. Let me and my team and my staff take care of you. We have patients coming from all over the country and all over the area on a regular basis, and there's room for you too. Now, if coming all this way to Boise is too big of a commitment, then please pick up the phone or email my office. We can work together from a distance.